Dum da da dum da 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 dum.
Drink a beer, everybody!
Hey everybody, Dr. T back with another beer short. There'll be times when you go into the fridge and are rooting through there and decide to move a couple things out of the way, and you might discover a beer that you've had in your fridge for probably longer than you should have, possibly. Happens to the best of us. But there is a whole school of thought on aging beers. And there are some beers that really lend themselves very well to aging, whether it's deliberate or impromptu aging. There are a few things to remember: the type of beer and the situation in which you are holding that beer are going to be very important as to whether or not that beer ages well. Time generally is not the friend of beer. That's primarily because it allows oxygen, one of the biggest enemies of beer, longer to act on a beer. Uh, a beer that's exposed to oxygen will go through the very unimaginatively named process called oxidation. Oxidation, in the best of times, will cause the beer to have some off flavors that might taste like raisin or prune or even sherry, which can be very pleasant in certain types of beers. In the worst of times, oxidation is going to make the beer taste like wet cardboard, which, as you can imagine, would not be good in any style of beer. So, when you are aging a beer, you are gambling with time and hoping that any oxidation that happens to the beer will end up being the good kind of oxidation. There are a few styles that lend themselves to aging. Those are generally any style that has very high ABV, especially the darker ones like imperial stouts or barley wines or Belgian quads. Things like that generally can age very well. And some sours, especially more traditional sour styles like gueuses and lambics and saisons, can really develop a lot of complexity over time. And that's really what you're looking for when you're purposefully aging a beer. You're looking to develop more complexity in that flavor. Now, how you hold the beer is important also. So you want it held in a dark place, and you want it held. The in-depth rule of thumb is about 10 degrees cooler than its fermentation temperature. A good guesstimate of that is eh, around 55 degrees. If you're in that 50 to 55 degree range, even a little bit colder, you're going to get the most out of the aging process. Colder than that, and the development over time of that beer is going to be much slower. So you may not get much of a result. Now, styles you definitely don't want to age: lagers, especially pilsners, any type of IPA you really don't want to age, and anything that says fresh hopped. One of the things that falls off during the aging process is hop character and bitterness. The bitterness in hops is created by alpha acids within the hop plant that will degrade fairly quickly. That's why when you read about IPAs, especially hazy IPAs, very often you're told to drink them fresh. And that's because they want you to taste the beer and the hop character, especially as they intended. And that tends to fall off fairly quickly. That's why whenever you're buying beer at a distributor, if you like your hazy IPAs, check those dates when you're buying beer. Make sure you're not buying something that's been sitting on the shelf for 6 months. It's generally not going to be the same beer that came out of the brewery at production. So you don't want to age IPAs. You don't want to age lagers, especially pilsners. They really should be drunk fresh. You don't want to age like fruit smoothie sours. You really don't want to encourage any secondary fermentation in that type of beer because there's just way too much sugar in there, and the risk of developing something that eventually explodes on you is too great. Plus, those heavily fruited flavors are best fresh. So, to recap, take your big, strong, dark beers and take your traditional sour beers. Those beers are solid candidates for some additional aging. Keep them in a cool 55 degrees, nice, dark place. Beers can age for a year or more and benefit from it. Some people have fun buying something that might come out once a year and buying several bottles of it and then drinking one bottle each subsequent year to see how it ages over time. Then again, some people will buy the same special release beer every year and store bottles of it every year and then do vertical tastings where you sit down and in one setting have some friends over and you'll drink 4 or 5 or 6 different vintages of the same beer. Aging beer can be fun. It can be challenging, especially if you're like me and you want to drink your beer now. But there are benefits to it. You just got to remember the rules. Until next time, happy drinking.